Todd Hightower, married, father of two. Son's recently engaged, so soon to be a grandfather to a 4-year-old, which has been a blessing in our life. And I'm a recent follower of Jesus Christ. You know, I'm an independent business owner. It's a family business that I purchased from my parents about 12 years ago. And I would say 4 years ago, changes in the government regulations and changes in the industry and some issues in personal relationships, the pressure in my life got to where I felt it was overbearing. My whole life I had been kind of the one in my family that took care of things. I was taking care of my grandmother, my great aunt, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and it got to be a struggle. My mother-in-law got sick. She and I were very close, and she spent 5 straight months in the hospital battling everything, cardiac problems, you name it. Towards the end of that 5 months, my father-in-law ended up being taken by ambulance and being coded to emergency room, and he ended up in ICU 1 floor below my mother-in-law and had an emergency leg amputation, and she passed before he woke up. So that would ensue for the next year and a half or so, taking care of him in a deep depression. It was 7 days a week. My wife was very tied up with that. The pressures of work continued to grow. Things that I felt I needed to take care of got to be a great deal, and I started drinking. I turned to vodka. I drank beer most of my life and never really had a major problem. You know, I was trying to get into bodybuilding, and somebody at the gym said, if you're going to drink, you can't drink beer, man. You're going to drink vodka. Well, that was the worst advice ever, so don't ever believe that, because I was not very good at it, or I was too good at it. So that would start a road of alcoholism, leading to my alcoholism. And it would get to a point, I guess about 1.5 years ago, that I sought treatment through an outpatient program. I'd had a DUI over 3 years ago and went through the processes. You know, you have to do this for the court. I need to do this so my wife will believe me. I was doing it for all these other reasons, thinking I can handle this. Relapsed, put myself into an outpatient program, and I was doing fairly well in outpatient. And then we had a situation just almost 1 year ago. My father-in-law passed away. We sat with him for several weeks, and I was lucky and blessed enough to be able to hold his hand as he passed. 5 days later, my brother, who was my best friend, my training partner, I got a call from the U.S. Embassy in the Ukraine that he had been killed in a car wreck. So I got to be the one telling my parents. You should never have to tell your parents that your brother was killed. And we spent a lot of time at the gym together, and that was my place to go to get away. And everybody at the gym knew us, so I couldn't go there. And my son, who likes to work out too, you know, he came and he said, Dad, I need to go work out, but I can't. Everybody wants to talk to me. So we struggled, and I finally got him buried at the National Cemetery. Felt like I needed to do the funeral myself, which I did, and I'm very proud of. It was very difficult, but after that, about a month later, my stepfather of 30 plus years ends up in ICU with another heart attack, and my mother's not very capable of taking care of herself, taking care of situations. So I was back and forth to Dallas, and I knew the first time I walked in the ICU room that he would never leave the room again. My mother continued to think he was going to get better. So about 12 days into ICU, I got to be the one to pull the plug, and he passed moments later. It was his time. So that put me in a position of taking care of my mother as well. And all these are excuses that I gave myself to drink. After my brother was killed, it hit me pretty hard, and I relapsed pretty hard. And if in addiction and alcoholism, If you drink for years, if you stop for some period of time and you think you can start over, you don't start over. You go right back where you were very rapidly. And I told myself, you can do this. You can stop. I don't know how many mornings I would wake up and say, I'm done. I cannot do this. And then after saying that in the morning, that afternoon, looking at a bottle of vodka and saying, what happened? How did this get? I don't remember going and getting this vodka. The hardest part for me, if I get emotional, excuse me, the most incredible thing, my whole world has always been my wife. And when I got to a point where I just didn't care about me anymore, and it was obvious I wasn't going to quit for me, I would tell myself, I'm going to quit for my wife. I'm going to quit for her. She deserves better. And then when you fail, and you see the hurt and the disappointment in her eyes, and you can't stop, it's a very dark place to end up mentally. And I remember having a conversation with myself this past August. This is it. I had drank too much. I'd actually got in my truck and driven. I had hit a pole on the side of the road in my truck. My wife was scared I'd killed somebody, and I had that sit down with myself and cried. And you have to quit. You're going to lose everything. You're going to lose your wife. You're going to, you're going to die. Or the biggest fear for me that I couldn't live with was to hurt or kill somebody else. And that lasted a couple of days. In the night of August 13th, I drank again, severely. In the morning of August 14th, a lady that's worked for my family and is a close friend, and I consider her family, came to me, and I had one of the most important meetings in my business that I've had in years set up. And she said, I cannot let you go to this meeting. I'd been drinking all night. And I broke. I looked at her, and her husband for many years before she divorced him had been a severe addict, and he still is. And I said, I want to get help. I need to get help. A lot of crying. She jumped to it. Her and another friend got a hold of my wife, and I checked myself into a county-run detox center in Little Rock, Arkansas. If you want to, I felt the true meaning of humility. Detoxing in a county-run facility, realizing not only did I ask to be there, that I needed to be there, that I belong there. It's not a very pleasant place. There's not a lot of very healthy people there. But I think that's when God started coming into my life. The director of that facility he told me, he said, I do this for a living. I want you to go to Hazelden in Minnesota. That's where I send people that are business owners or healthcare professionals. And I fought with him a little bit, and he said, look, I'm not going to tell you how to do your business. Listen to me. So I agreed to go. I was scared to death. I just spent a week in not the greatest, not the greatest place in the world. I will say the staff there were incredible. The circumstances they work under are tremendous. It was very humbling. And when I was in rehab, I'd say it's very sobering to be there, physically and mentally. And I was scared to death. And I asked my wife, because I was scheduled to go straight from detox, get on an airplane, and go to Minnesota. And I asked my wife, I said, would you come get me? I've been here 5 or 6 days. I'm not going to drink. I really do not want, my daughter was going to come see me before I left. And I said, I really don't want her to see me here. So she agreed to come get me and bring me home and then fly with me to Minnesota. And I was scared. She was scared. Never been really scared of a whole lot in my life, but walking into that center, It was tough. But once I got through the first couple of nights, I was excited. And I've been a little familiar with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and from previously trying to quit. And I knew the first step. I had the first step mastered. I had admitted to myself, which is the most important thing. I admitted to myself that I had no power over alcohol at that point in my life, and I never will. That was the easy step for me. I mean, it's one of the hardest steps, but once you get there, things get easier. Second step, of course, is at least giving into the possibility of a higher power. That wasn't really difficult either. I've struggled with spirituality and God and organized religion for most of my life. I was born and raised Southern Pentecostal, and you're going to hell no matter what you do. And the old joke was I might as well enjoy the ride. So I did struggle with step 2 a little bit. So I signed up for every spirituality class they had, because then you get step 3, and step 3 is the doozy. Step 3 is I willingly surrender my life to God. When surrender, the words sound easy, I guess, but somebody like me that was raised to take care of things my whole life, is surrendering to just was a foreign concept, I guess, and very difficult. And I remember I was sitting in a spirituality session in treatment, and we were talking about spirituality. We were talking about submitting our life to a higher power, and we had this wonderful counselor from Iceland. She had the most beautiful voice, and at the end of an hour, she says, "You realize you have already surrendered to a higher power." And the group of us looked at her, stunned, and she said, "That bottle of vodka had become your higher power. You were lying, cheating. It was driving your life." And that hit hard. And I was very fortunate to be in the place that I was in. It's based on the 12 steps. It's based on having a relationship with God. So to speed it up a little, I made it through. All the guys in my unit were incredible. I mean, it affects everybody. We had people that were homeless when they came in. We had a U.S. senator had just left. We had surgeons and orthopedic surgeons and chiropractors and doctors, and it was a really well-mixed group, and everybody had the same issue. And they tell you can't do this alone. The statistics show that you cannot do this alone. So if you're not familiar with addiction, you go to treatment to get stabilized. And the whole time we were there, they pound into your head, what's your home plan? What's your aftercare plan? What are you going to do when you leave here? This treatment starts when you leave these doors. So I'd set up everything. I'd set up a sponsor. I'd set up AA meeting. I'd signed up for outpatient care over here at Harbor House in Fort Smith. And I volunteered. I paid to volunteer for a breathalyzer machine that I take 3 breathalyzer tests a day, and it doesn't send the report to me, it sends it to my wife. And everybody thought I lost my mind. But I was done. I was committed to changing my life. And when I got home, I talked to a very good friend of mine who had his own issues, and he was there for my wife he and his wife were there for my wife while I was gone, and he was right there when I got home. And the funny thing is, my brother had been his support for PTSD until my brother was killed, and I had been trying to help him, and here he was helping me. And I said, "Aaron, how did you do it?" I don't know if I should use his name, but how did you do this? And he said, "Nothing in my life was right until I got right with God." And there was a guy, there was a famous professor, and I'm going blank on his name, and he had kept it very simple. He said, "I wake up every morning and I say, 'Good morning, you're an alcoholic. There is a God and you're not him. Please, God, have me do your will today.'" And that's how I started. And as I went to AA meetings, these guys, AA is a little cruder than church. But what I noticed with the long-term sobriety people was they had this peace and serenity in their life. And I wanted that really bad. One of my dearest friends had always told me, as my stress level rose, she would say, "Todd, you have to find some peace in your life." And I'd say, I don't know what that is. And the more I prayed, God started showing up. I've talked to people that said they gave their life to God and were filled with the Holy Spirit and took off from day one. And I guess for me, God knew that would have probably scared me to death. So for me, it was I kept praying. And I would try to take the principles I learned in rehab to stop, be present in the moment, take time to respond to a situation, not react. And I would take that time to say a short prayer. And I'll never forget, early on when I just got home, my wife's uncle died. We've had a lot of deaths in the last 3 or 4 years. And she was worried. She did not want me to go because it was in a town, the entire town were bars, casinos. He was the mayor. There was going to be a lot of drinking. But one of the things I learned was halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And I finally went to her and said, I would much rather we come up with a plan and me be with you than for me to sit in this house alone for 3 days. Because that's my enemy. The devil lives there for me. So I went. And of course, the first night we get there, it's right before Halloween, and it's buy a cup on the street for $4, and they have free beer up and down the whole street, and there's a Halloween party going on, and I'm shaking. I'm like white knuckling it. And then the next evening we had the celebration of her uncle's life in his favorite bar. And I walked in, and her sister had told some family members that I wasn't drinking. I don't know why she told them, but 2 cousins, as soon as I walked in, they said, "We hear you're one of us. You come sit right here. We've been sober 5 years." And man, that was God sending me some help. And he continues to speak to me every day. I came back, and Momentum has been a place that God really speaks to me when I'm in this building and in these services. And my wife had never seen me take communion, and I just had this overwhelming feeling that today's the day you take communion. And I got up and took communion, and I remember she had tears streaming down her face. And I told her, I said, I don't know, I can't explain it, but I get these feelings from God, and I'm not going to question them anymore. I'm just going to do them. And I started thinking about being baptized. There was argument between my grandmother and my mother whether I was really baptized, but to me, it was, if I had been baptized, I was a little kid, and I was thinking about it, and I talked to my close friend, and she's like, that's wonderful, pray about it. And I swear I walked into church Sunday morning, and the whole video screen said baptism. And I said, Lord, you have my attention. And I think I met you right after service and said I need to sign up. And since then, my prayers are getting a little bigger. God, have me do your will today and give me the strength to be the man I need to be for those that depend upon me. They're pretty simple. I haven't tried to make it too difficult, but I'm finding that peace. And it's the most incredible thing I've ever known, is the grace of God. And it's my business right now. I mean, I could be bankrupt in 3 or 4 months, depending upon what the government does. But I found some peace in that through God's strength. And I've learned that I can do all things through Christ. I can do very little through myself. And he sent me a lot of help. God's now taking the #1 role, but my wife is still the most incredible thing in my life and the biggest blessing from God. And she's probably in the 3rd row on the left side when this airs. And I love you. Thank you for everything and staying with me. It hasn't been a fun journey, but I think the there's hope. I mean, without God, I would not be sober today. And I say that, it's 5.5 months. Today's day 160. So it's still pretty raw. And it's, we're talking about temptations in our program right now. And for me, I have to plan every day almost to prepare myself for those temptations, because even though I'm walking with God and I'm talking to God every day and He's showing His presence in my life, He doesn't take the temptations away. I mean, I get tested. And for an alcoholic, sometimes it's not so much a temptation or an urge, it's an intense craving. Almost, it can be a life or death kind of craving. And I have to prepare for that. But if you slow down and you realize what it is and you catch it, I look at it as with God's help and His strength, I can take the temptations and turn them into little triumphs. And through doing that, I've started to rebuild my dignity, my integrity. My wife and I are doing an evening Bible study for couples every night right now, and I thought we had an incredible relationship before, but it's getting so much stronger, and our communication is wonderful. And God has brought me to a very good place. I feel blessed to be an alcoholic. I know that sounds insane, but without alcoholism, I don't know that I would have taken such a deep look at myself and got to a point where I would break down and understand what surrender is and what can happen when you do surrender. So I like to say now I'm not an alcoholic in recovery. I'm an alcoholic in discovery, and it's wonderful. I mean, it really is. Before God came into my heart and into my life, I would look and I couldn't see myself ever not drinking. For the rest of your life, you're never going to drink again. I mean, that was a big thing. I mean, so much of my life had centered around drinking, vacations and business outings or out with friends, and and early on I told my wife I'm special. I can't drink. So now so we made it a joke. So now you're special. But with the grace of God, I look at myself now and say, why would you ever drink again? I don't want to lose this. And I know now, failing my wife, in her eyes, the shame and guilt that caused me, but there was always an excuse. I can hide this. I can get away with it this time. In this walk with God, I don't want to know that shame for letting God down, because you can't hide it from God. And it's like you said Sunday, the temptation is the desire of the flesh. The sin is when you give in to that temptation, and continually giving in leads to death. And you said that's death of the spirit and the soul. For me, I know, and so many of the men and women that I've been working with over the last year, it's physical death. And unfortunately, out of my group, we're about 85% relapse rate. We all communicate, try to keep each other on the right track. And 2 of my friends have died, and they knew they would die. Doctors told them, if you drink again, you will die. And that's the kind of temptation that you have to overcome as an alcoholic or an addict. And I can't explain that to somebody that doesn't understand it, but I understand it. And they will check themselves out of the hospital and go straight to the liquor store and die. I needed God to do this. There's no doubt in my mind. And He has shown up in a big way. And He has completely changed my life, not just in alcohol. He has not taken the temptations away, but He has most definitely curbed the cravings to where I can handle them. Not a doubt in my mind. I can't tell you how many times in the last 5.5 months the thought shows up in your mind out of nowhere. I could stop in here and have a drink. Nobody will ever know. God will know. And I get this little video in my head. You know where that leads. That leads back to that detox center in Little Rock, Arkansas, with the 18-year-old girl coming off of heroin and nothing you can do to help her. And